All right, guys, it is NFL Draft Eve, and as we count down the days to the biggest event in the NFL offseason, we are breaking down all fantasy relevant positions in our pre-draft rankings. We've already touched on quarterbacks and wide receivers. Today, we're breaking down running backs, so go ahead, like the video, comment whether you agree or disagree, or have your own personal rankings. Subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you after that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football, and we are continuing our pre-draft rankings, again highlighting those fantasy important positions and the guys that you want to be paying attention to as the NFL draft unfolds over Thursday to Saturday. Again, completely landing spot agnostic. We're just really trying to highlight the skills, traits, and abilities that these guys bring to the field when they're drafted. Obviously, these are going to change massively considering draft capital and landing spot. But today we're going to be jumping down into running backs, which again, hotly contested position in fantasy recently. I feel like the community has swerved away from running backs being the primary assets, and now it's a hugely wide receiver driven fantasy sports game. So it'll be fun to talk about and try to evaluate its position going forward. But let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into our first number one running back prospect. It's going to be Bijan Robinson. Absolutely no one's surprised. This guy is landing spot agnostic. Does not matter where he ends up. And obviously for today's video, we're going to be placing these guys in either an Austin Eckler list, San Diego Chargers, or a Joe Mixon list, Bengals, two areas I think is going to be very, very fruitful for running back success for fantasy. But Bijan can go to the the New England Patriots and still be selected 101 in most draft formats, just based on how valuable he is. I mean, this guy has been talked up for years and years and years as one of the most coveted assets in fantasy. I mean, he is the whole package. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread. One of the greatest running back prospects of all time. People are saying he's the greatest since Saquon Barkley. I personally think Bijan is a little bit better than Saquon. Saquon was an excellent pass catcher, and so is Bijan. But I think Bijan is just a better pure runner and has a better ability to make cuts and drive the ball down the field running the ball. And his running, just the way he makes cuts, his vision is just a thing of pure beauty. But that's not that's the great thing about Bijan. Most GMs consider him a top receiving prospect in this draft. So you're basically getting a running back and a wide receiver in one package. And oh, by the way, he's also excellent at blocking. So if he goes to, say, Cincinnati Bengals, where the O-line's a little bit suspect, or a Philadelphia Eagles, where they just lost Isaac Seumalo on the inside of the line, he's definitely one of those guys that can plug in and help block for their quarterbacks in non-run plays. So my opinion, this dude is a top 10 pick in the draft. He should be going top 10. Again, amazing running back. Also a great wide receiver, can flex him out wide. He has lined up in the slot or out wide at Texas, and also is a great blocker. So all those things rolled into one. I think he's a much more special prospect than, just a pure running back. And I do think that the hate on the running back position has swung a little bit too far. I think it's time to regress towards the mean and actually value these players for what they're worth. And Bijan's going to be even worth more of that, just given his multi-function ability and multiple different options within the offense. So yeah, absolutely no surprise. He's going to be the 101 in Superflex and non-Superflex, all over the board. Whoever has lucky enough to draft him, enjoy it. He's one of the most coveted assets in fantasy in ever, basically. So moving on to number two, we're really going to spice it up already, because number two on my list is going to be Zach Charbonnet. And I've been rising quite a bit on Zach Charbonnet over this offseason. He really quickly, after the film study and the deep dive into his production, really jumped into that tier 2 with Gibbs, and then actually surpassed Gibbs. Not saying he's way ahead of my rankings over Gibbs, but he's really like 2A to Gibbs's 2B. And that comes from a lot of different things that I've evaluated coming to these running backs. The most important thing is that I think Zach Charbonnet just has a more broader skill set than Jahmyr Gibbs. Yes, Jahmyr is great at like one or two things and may outpace him, Zach, as far as elusivity and pass catching, but I think Zach Charbonnet brings a lot more assets to the table and therefore will be on the field more. I think he's not a true 3-down prospect like Bijan Robinson is, but he is very incredibly close to being that true 3-down prospect. Also, he is kind of that monster of a man that you want to see at a running back position. He's 6'1", 215 pounds on the larger side, and really a bruiser of a back. He can take contact. He seeks out contact and is aggressive and can break those tackles. He's definitely a guy that you're going to be seeing on the goal line. He'll have a lot more goal line utility than Gibbs. One highlight play that sticks out in my mind is when Dorian Thompson-Robinson handed the ball off, and he didn't quite get the handoff clean, but that was no problem for Charbonnet as he grabbed the hands of DTR and just dragged him into the end zone along with the ball and his own body. So just the pure strength and power that Charbonnet brings to the running back position is incredible. And on top of that pure power he has as a running back, he's also a phenomenal pass catcher. So he brings, that kind of quote unquote cheat code. We always look for pass catching running backs in fantasy. So he has that ability as well, which again is the reason why Nick Chubb has been devalued in recent years because he's viewed more as a pure runner. But Zach also has that ability to be a pass catcher in the offense as well, especially taking dump offs or short screens out of the backfield, really churning up those fantasy points. And I mean, I wouldn't be upset taking him as early as the 105, even in a super flex. I know that's really, really spicy, but he could be the fourth skill position, if not the third skill position player off the board behind JSN and Bijan Robinson. So now that Zach is number 2, we're going to move on to Jameer, who is number 3. I know we talked a lot about him with the comparison to Charbonnet, so we'll keep it short here. A big concern around Gibbs is going to be his weight. And he weighed in at 199 at the combine, and everyone's freaking out. He didn't make the 200 cut. And to the majority of people, they would look at it and be like, it's 1 pound. Why does that matter? Eat a plate of nachos, and he would have weighed in at 200 yards, and people wouldn't care about that. Yes, I get that. And on the surface, it looks like kind of a meaningless difference of 1 pound. But we all know how these guys prepare for the combine, and I believe Jameer Gibbs' playing weight is more around the 190 area. So he is going to be a pretty light back compared to anyone who's already has achieved fantasy success in the NFL. Again, he's not going to be that bruiser. He's not going to be running primarily in between the tackles. It does concern me how much punishment he can take from the running back position, especially, a position that is known for taking multiple hits. But he will be tremendous in the receiving game. That's where you're really going to find his value. And I think his floor is a guy like Samaje Perine who comes in, and that's a very, very conservative floor for a guy like Jameer Gibbs. I think his upside is way higher, but as he's a change of pace back, comes in, takes pass catching snaps, but hopefully he has an upside that's higher. It's just my concern that he might be relegated to more of a pass catching role. He's not going to be out there for all 3 downs. I mean, on a pure power run or, a blocking play or a passing play where the running back will have to pick up blocks or pick up interior pressure. Jameer Gibbs probably won't be out there, so it does limit his upside if he's not out there for those plays. But again, what makes him so special is his shiftiness, his ability to catch the ball. And once he gets past that first level of defense, once in the secondary, he's gone. He is an absolute track star, so freaking quick, and he can absolutely explode for some massive plays and take him to the house. He's going to have a ton of upside. So he's the first guy that's not entirely landing spot agnostic. It is going to drive his value up or down based on where he lands. But right now, evaluating his talent, there are some concerns, but he should still be a great product at the next level. So moving on to our number 4th guy that I have here, it's going to be Tank Bigsby. Again, the 3 guys you already mentioned, their value isn't going to drop too much. They're pretty much the top 3 backs, regardless of where they land. This now marks where, it's truly landing spot dependent for running backs, what situation and what the draft capital is. But out of all these guys, I think Tank Bigsby has the best talent of the best of the rest. He is on the bigger side of the running backs. I do like to lean towards the bigger backs. He's 6 foot, 210 pounds, and he really does impose his will on the football field. I mean, he does have tremendous ability to power through and break tackles. Much more than I think a lot of the undersized backs and some of the lesser running backs down the list who don't seek out contact as much as Tank does. He does have an incredibly low center of gravity. Some of the cuts that he makes are just pure insanity, and I love the way he moves with the ball. And he has a nose for trying to seek out that second level of the defense. And things like arm tackles, things like an undersized linebacker, they're not going to be able to take him down. I like the way he breaks through tackles, and he does have the ability and the athleticism to break off massive runs at the second level. A guy that, he will be a 1-2 down back. He will see, not all the snaps in the field, but he will be down there for a majority of snaps and has an opportunity to carve out a really good career for himself in the NFL. Moving on to number 5 on this list, I'm going really far down. I'm going to go with Sean Tucker. I might be a prisoner of the past and how much Sean Tucker was hyped up coming into this season, but I still think there is a lot to love about Sean Tucker, and I think that he might honestly just have a higher floor than the rest of the running backs on this list. But despite him being injured, despite the injury concerns, despite him not testing, I do love what I see on tape from this guy. What really impresses me about Sean Tucker is his football IQ, and I think that's going to really resonate well with a lot of NFL coaches, NFL GMs. It's going to get him a ton of opportunities on the field because of just how well he sees the field, how smart he is with the ball. He does not have a propensity to turn the ball over, and he's just really good at finding those gaps and those reads in the offense and actually turning a 2-yard play into a 6-yard play or a 3-yard play into a 9-yard play. He really knows how to sniff out the second level of the defense. Also, he has an above average pass catching ability, which is why I'm ranking him higher than some of the other guys in this list. Again, we know pass catching running backs are a cheat code for fantasy. So the more ability that he has to take screens out of the backfield, in half PPR is a half point plus. PPR, obviously, absolutely incredible. Those are the guys you want on your team. So even if he is relegated to a pass catching role down the field, I would be taking a shot at him, mid to second, end of second round, just because I think he does have the ability to flourish into something a little bit more. My comp for him, obviously, in an upside aspect, would be Aaron Jones. A guy who can be quite inconsistent at times, a guy who may not stay on the field all the time, but is a great back, has great shiftiness, and then also just tremendous pass catching ability, which can absolutely win you the week for fantasy. Remember, this is a fantasy-based podcast, fantasy-based show, so we're ranking these guys for fantasy. Also, without even the testing, we don't even need the testing to know that he is a track star. He has dynamic speed, one of the fastest guys in the class. So every so often he will break off just one of those absolute house calls and those big plays getting you a lot of points. So I like his upside. I know he's been falling in a lot of recent drafts, but I'm willing to take him kind of around the mid-second round just to get that shot on him and hopefully hit on one of those later round running backs. So moving on to our number 6 prospect is going to be Kendre Miller. For me, Miller's been rising up the draft board quite a bit after the season has ended. There's a ton to like with Miller just from an overall running back prospect. First, you got to start with the size. He is 5'11 and 215 pounds. He's really dense and can really sustain contact. I don't have as much injury concerns with him as some of the other guys in this class, and I think that he will be a bruising back, a guy that, it's going to take more than 1 or 2 guys to take him down. He can really hit the gap hard in some power eye schemes and break through to the second level. I do view him very similarly to a Nick Chubb type player, not going to be heavily utilized in the pass game. He does have the hands that it might be used on an as-needed basis, but he's going to be one of those just really amazing pure runners in the class. Again, like Chubb, most of his production is going to be utilized and realized on those first and second downs. And again, he will rely on his agility and power to break through that first line of defense. He's not the best at finding the gap. He's not the best at elusivity once it gets into the second level of the defense, but I think just, his ability to hold onto the ball, not make mistakes, and then just overall jack of all trades when it comes to the running back position should allow him to be a very productive back in the NFL in the future. And, obviously, if he goes to a great landing spot, then he could skyrocket into the high second rounds, maybe even the end of first rounds in your rookie drafts. Moving on, our number 7th prospect here is going to scroll back up. Going to be Devin Achane. And before you just absolutely eviscerate me for having Devin Achane ranked as the 7th ranked running back prospect, this is again for fantasy. I will reiterate that and just listen to my explanation here. He is a track star. That's really all he is. And again, he was really hyped up coming in to this season. Obviously, he has the big name, the big school at Texas A&M, but there are so many things that concern me. He's very undersized as a running back. He measured in at the combine at 5'8" and 185 pounds, and it makes me extremely concerned about his ability, to stay on the field and sustain hits at the NFL level. I don't really envision him as a guy that's going to be, out there, every first or second down running in some of these power schemes. I have heard a lot of comps going around that he has the upside of Chris Johnson, just as, an insane fast guy that can break off a ton of runs. But there are some key things that they're missing. First off, Chris Johnson was productive over a decade ago, and the NFL has changed quite radically in that time, especially defenses. Defenses are a lot quicker and a lot more agile, and I don't think Chris Johnson would have really had that much success in the current NFL with the speed and explosivity that you see out of these defensive linemen. And also, he is so much smaller than Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson was 6 feet, maybe a little bit taller than that. You could see him, he still had that power to break through some of these arm tackles. And frankly, that's one of the things that concerns me with A-Chain. He doesn't have that power. Sometimes he does get tripped up with a fairly weak tackle from a linebacker, and it's going to cause a ton of strife for fantasy owners when they see him thinking he's found a hole, found a gap, going to break it off for a very long run, and one arm comes in here and he's tripped and he's down. He does have insane upside. He will go off for games, but I think the inconsistency there with his questions around his ability to stay on the field, and I don't think his utilization is going to be more of like DeAndre Swift last year, where he's on the field for about 40 to 48% of snaps. So with his limited roles and skill set, he's going to be way overdrafted. I'm kind of avoiding him as a landmine in my rookie drafts. Moving on. Number 8 is going to be Roschon Johnson, the RB2 out of Texas. And this guy, frankly, is one of the most underrated running backs in this class, in my opinion. I think if he stayed at school, returned to Texas next year, or if he transferred out, he would have been a top 5 RB, but he was just stuck behind Bijan Robinson, who is obviously a god amongst men, the best running back prospect since sliced bread. But I think his upside and his ability to show his actual workload were stymied being behind Bijan. But however, in the limited role that he did have at Texas, I thought he showed tremendous upside. He is a larger back that does run with power. If he has proper time, his acceleration is a little bit lackluster, but with the proper time, once he gets a full head of steam, he is damn near impossible to take down. None of these arm tackles are going to be slowing down Roschon Johnson, and I think a lot of NFL coaches and GMs are going to see him and think he's going to slot in very well with an existing committee with some of those smaller backs. He can be that power bruiser coming in on the first and second down. He also is another guy that I like just from his football IQ. He just seems, when the pressure comes down, when the play starts to break down, or when, pressure is coming in around him, he seems to just always make the right decision. He's a high football IQ and really protects the ball. So I definitely think he's worth a shot. He's a guy that's been climbing up rookie drafts, a guy that most people were thinking you get him at the end of the 3rd round. Right now, I think you got to take your shot on him, at the end of the 2nd round, early 3rd round. And obviously, if he goes to a good landing spot, he could definitely be a hidden gem as far as running back position goes. Number 9 is going to be Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. This is a guy that is a huge sleeper. Tons of talk in the Dynasty fantasy community. A lot of the talking heads love this guy as a diamond in the rough, especially after his Senior Bowl performance. And I'm glad Taj is getting some recognition. I think he had an incredible season, capped off by an absolute insane performance to help Tulane win their bowl game this past year. However, I think Tyjae Spears' ADP is a little bit high for where I would currently, rate him at, or where I would currently take him at. I mean, he is an above average runner and above average pass catcher. I get that, but everyone was kind of captivated by his highlight moment at the Senior Bowl. You know which one I'm talking about, where he comes out, breaks an in route, absolutely sheds the linebacker, runs down and makes an insane run and catch, takes it to the end zone. But in the NFL, that play would just never happen. There's just no way that the time is going to for running back coming out of the backfield, there's no way that he's going to have enough time to let that play develop and let him get to that position where he's going to get the catch. The play would already be over at that point, or the quarterback's already going to make a different read and throw it to someone else. So while it's a very flashy and fun play to watch, it's not something that's realistic as far as its translation to the NFL. It shows that he has good feet. He makes good cuts. His ability to shed defenders is great. But like I said in my notes here, great for an and one mixtape, no translation to the NFL. I think he is going to come in as a great change of pace back, a guy that's going to be used in tandem. Frankly, if a team wanted to take Roshan and Tajay Spears, I think they would be great complements to each other. Roshan being the power back, Tajay being more of a pass catcher, and a guy that comes in as more of a change of pace back. I just don't think he's going to really get the upside that you're going to want to see from a fantasy workhorse. He could come in, makes a high-end backup. Think more of like an Alexander Madison or a Khalil Herbert type of player here for Tajay Spears. Last and least, we're going to go find a guy who has taken an absolute tremendous fall down the fantasy football rankings and real life NFL rankings. That's going to be Zach Evans out of Ole Miss, a guy that at some points this past season, maybe even before the season, was considered a top 3 running back prospect in this class, maybe the 4th prospect behind Charbonnet. But I'll put him here in the top 10, but I'm not taking him where his current ADP stands. This man has more red flags than the Australian Grand Prix. It's an F1 joke for you guys, for the one person out there who got that. But there's just so many things that concern me about Zach Evans and his, not only his play on the field, but his career in general. First, he got beat out at TCU by Kendre Miller, and then when he transferred to Ole Miss, he actually didn't take the majority of snaps at Ole Miss. He wasn't the primary back at Ole Miss. And also there was that whole recruiting fiasco where he's from Georgia. He apparently was committed to going to Georgia, and then suddenly a week later announces he's going to TCU. There wasn't a lot of, like, there was a very, very dramatic that happened. A lot of drama came out about it. Don't know why he immediately shifted his commitment, but it just doesn't make sense to me as something that, it just leaves me with some bad vibes. Just with how much he's bounced around and like the teams and the programs that have quote unquote given up on him. And from the tape, this man has the vision of Trent Richardson. Seriously, Stevie Wonder could read defenses and make better, and find holes better than Zach Evans does. Like, I was watching his highlight tape, and these are supposed to be his highlights, the plays that he actually was good at. And I'm just screaming at Zach Evans, why aren't you taking the obvious gap on the left? Why aren't you making this cut? Clearly, I could never make those cuts, but, I can yell at him because that's clearly what they're supposed to do as a highly touted NFL running back prospect. It was just, cuts that I would have seen many of the other running backs in this draft class, maybe even guys that didn't even make it to this list, that just looked like an obvious hole that you would go ahead and bounce out to the outside and take it to the house, or you take it for an extra 5 yards. And he just seems to stick with his first read. And if there's no hole there, he just tries to power his way through and make a hole. And also he's not very aggressive when it comes to the ball. I mean, you look at guys like Charbonnet who are willing to fight for contact, really want to seek out, and bruise the defense, but he tends to shy away from contact. He tends to not be very aggressive when he has the ball. So my current ADP on Zach Evans, maybe more of a mid-third round pick. Again, very landing spot dependent, but if he goes to a bad landing spot, then I'm completely out on Zach Evans. It's just a guy that seriously concerns me. So that is going to wrap up our top 10 running back rankings prior to the NFL draft. Again, I can't wait to redo this in a week's time after all the landing spots and draft capital has been assigned to these guys. But I think it's going to be a very fun exercise and see how many of these guys can translate to the NFL. Again, one of the best running back classes we've seen in a long time. So if you're a guy that, again, as a championship team, my last note here, definitely if you've been trading away first round picks or trading away higher end picks to go ahead and win those championships and you're in contention for a championship, this is definitely a draft class where you can pick up startable running back talent at the back end of the second round or in the third round. So definitely a guy that you should really be keeping your eyes on for those types of teams. So thanks again. That was our third out of our 4. Tomorrow is the NFL draft. We're going to kick it off with a very brief episode on the tight ends to look forward to. Probably the most, or at least exciting of these pre-draft rankings that we'll be doing, but definitely get my tight end thoughts out there. So we'll see you back tomorrow and enjoy the NFL draft.